Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 91. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Dave, how you doing?
Doing good. Today is the 22nd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that means we have 3 weeks from now, the start of the new league year will begin. Obviously, the legal tampering period a couple of days before that. But, man, the NFL calendar moves right along, does it not? 3 weeks from today. And obviously, between now and then, the combine will have taken place. So it's going to be an exciting couple of 2 or 3 weeks here that'll probably move pretty fast, I think.
I can't wait because the last 2 weeks have been pretty slow, at least when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not a lot of news there. Talked about the coaching changes on Monday's episode, but not much has happened. So Dave and I will just kind of kick around some off-season ideas, some stuff we've written about, and kind of talk about it on the podcast. And so we'll start things off with an article that you wrote yesterday, Dave, suggesting certainly not a marquee free agent name, but one that I think fits, one that makes a lot of sense, and one that could land in Pittsburgh. And former versatile Oregon defensive back Ugo Amadi, who was with the Chiefs and not offered a futures contract after they won the Super Bowl. So he's now a free agent. Why do you think Amadi would be a good fit and potential option for Pittsburgh?
Well, first and foremost, we don't know for sure he wasn't offered a futures contract, but did not sign a futures contract. Right. Now we have seen this in the past, especially with Steelers players in the past. Right, the season ends, they don't sign a futures contract right away. They take a look around, and then they say, "Okay, maybe I'll just go ahead and sign back with the team." Someone with his experience that he has, it's probably not, it's not unbelievable that he's saying, "Hey, let me take a look around here real quick," and instead of just jumping back and signing a reserve futures contract with the Chiefs, maybe there's a better opportunity out there somewhere. So good for him, for doing that. He'll land somewhere, right? Between now and the start of training camp, I'm pretty sure of that. This is a guy that we've had, in Ugo Amadi, that we've had conversations about in the past a few times, and most notably ahead of the 2019 NFL draft. The Steelers reportedly had him in for a pre-draft visit that year. I think you had wrote up in the annual Pro Day tracker that Mark Bruner was at the Oregon Pro Day that year. This is a guy that's a versatile, physical kind of defensive back, undersized, however. Since entering the NFL, most of his snaps, especially in his early days with the Seattle Seahawks, who, by the way, drafted him in the 4th round of the 2019 NFL draft out of Oregon. He's played predominantly in nickel slot type situations. Once again, a physical kind of player. He kind of feels like, even though Mike Hilton went undrafted, he kind of feels along the lines of that point in his career right now, if you will. And once again, obviously he was a 4th round draft pick, whereas Mike Hilton was what, an undrafted guy, right? Mm-hmm. And but this is a guy that's played 47 games in his first 2 seasons, or in his first 3 seasons with the Seahawks. The earlier tape with him seems to be better than the latter tape after the right ahead of the 2022 season last year getting underway. He was traded from the Seahawks to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it was something like 10 days later, they turned around and the Eagles traded him to Tennessee. And Tennessee then proceeded to waive him by the end of October. Not too long after that, he landed on the Chiefs practice squad. I think he got elevated for one game with them a little bit later in the season there, played only on special teams. And that's another note about him as well, too. He's got quite a bit of special teams experience. He can play I think gunner and he's that physical for a small guy there. So if you look at the Steelers depth chart right now and especially slot corner alternatives and all like that, and I think this is a guy that especially if you could get him on a minimal deal, which for him I think would be $1.08 million. It would also be a veteran benefit contract, which means it would come with a reduced salary cap charge. Why wouldn't you see if he would like to sign with you, especially if there's no guaranteed money? Let's say you don't have to give him, $152.5 thousand dollars as a minimum signing bonus. Just signing him for the flat out minimum. This is a guy they've had a little bit of history with pre-draft. I don't see why you wouldn't reach out to him and see if he wouldn't want to come in and compete for a spot over the summer.
If he was hypothetically signed, are we talking pure slot corner, or do you think with his background he could play a bit more than just that?
I don't think he's a guy that he could probably play outside in a pinch, break.
I guess more like safety. Could he rotate in a little bit of safety action?
I don't think there's a lot of that on his tape at the NFL level. Now he has logged some snaps, probably in some rotation type, inverted, cover two type situations or whatnot. But I don't think there's a lot of tape to back up at the NFL level that he could be, let's say, a strong safety. Now, I tell you, he's not afraid of sticking his face in the fan and all, and he's physical as far as that goes. So could he potentially transition more and be more of a, I don't know, just a flat out, dime kind of player potentially? Okay. Could you do something with him? I don't think you want to rely on him being obviously an every down strong safety,
Sure.
But I think there's enough versatility. In fact, when he came out of Oregon, I think that was one of the pluses with him, is that he had played a little bit of safety, if memory serves me, right?
Yeah, he was lauded as somebody that wore a lot of hats there. So obviously I'm not talking about making him a full-time, safety or maybe a full-time anything, but just in terms of what you could offer, in terms of sub packages, in terms of post-snap rotation, those types of things. The more that you can do there, the more value you're going to bring to a defense.
Right. So now, once again, this would, I think the only way the Steelers would have interest in him would be a minimal contract, so.
Yeah, and that should be his price tag. He's not going to get anything above that for any team.
Right. And I think now it's just a matter of him, assuming there's no character issues, which I haven't found that to be the case or anything like that. But, he's going to look around. I think that's obvious at this point. And he's got to look at, what maybe gives him the best chance to make a 53-man roster this year. And I would say it's a better than 50 or maybe right at a 50-50 chance that could potentially happen with the Steelers, depending obviously how the rest of the offseason, you don't know what's going to happen with Edmonds and Casey and, obviously we'll see what happens with the corner situation there as well too. But once again, this is just it's a connecting of the dots on a guy that's not going to move the Richter scale, even if you did sign him. It's just fun when you see some of these names surface on the transaction list, knowing that the Steelers have had, past conversations with them. I think this is a guy that potentially they might might make a phone call to.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's well reasoned. And again, Pittsburgh circling back to guys they had, some apparent interest in coming out of the draft is a very Steelers on brand thing to do. So a good suggestion by you, and we'll keep tabs on where he lands. Dave, you also wrote about with the franchise tag window opening earlier this week in Pittsburgh. They're not candidates to franchise tag any of their pending free agents. There was one idea kicked around on Twitter about the transition tag, not used often, but has been used by Pittsburgh in the past. Jason Worlds received the transition tag a while back, correct?
Right.
Was there anybody else? Wasn't there somebody else that got the transition tag?
Didn't Max Starks get it?
That sounds right.
Several years ago. I mean, obviously, look, dating back to what I have in there, 2016. I think the transition tag across the NFL has been used just 3 times, Mm-hmm. So that tells you a lot right there. But I didn't go into this offseason thinking I would have to explain this or write about why it's unlikely that anybody on the Steelers roster would be a candidate or shouldn't be a candidate to receive either the franchise or the transition tag. But thanks to the internet and, not only on Twitter, but I've on some other blogs, I've seen some misinformation float around. So I used yesterday afternoon to say, all right, I'll go ahead and there's a fish in the barrel here. I'll go ahead and shoot it.
Yeah. And the fish was a suggestion that the team should or could transition tag cornerback Cam Sutton. Can you explain why that almost certainly will not occur?
Yeah, for starters, the transition tag, what it is, it's a 1-year tender for amount of the average of the top 10 salaries at each position, as opposed to the top 5 for a franchise tag. The transition tag guarantees that the original club has the right of first refusal for any player that they transition tag should he sign an offer sheet with another team. They have the right to match that offer as it is written. If they don't match the offer as it is signed offer that a player transition tag player gets from another team, if they don't match that exact offer, the player goes to that new team, and then the former team receives 0 compensation, and 0 as in nada, zilch, nothing, 0.000, no compensatory draft pick value or anything. The guy just walks out the door and he's gone. All right. So that's one of the downfalls against the transition tag. Now, obviously, poison pills aren't allowed anymore. With the player must play, say Minnesota.
The Steve Hutchinson situation.
Must play 5 games in Minnesota. It's crazy stuff that we've seen in the past. Thankfully, the NFL has done away with that crazy poison pill stuff and all like that. However, other teams could put together a signed offer sheet, depending on their cap situation and how they want to structure guaranteed money and stuff like that, where it makes it hard for other teams to match the deal, so that's another aspect of this to think about. That is terms beyond poison pills, if you will. The other thing to think about here is the transition tag for cornerbacks this year is $15.791 million. All right. I think most people listening to this along with you would think, man, that's way, that's high as far as a value for one season comes for Cameron Sutton. Even if you deemed it as being the ceiling that you could live with 15.791 million, you still have to be able to accommodate that tag amount underneath the cap once you issue the transition tender. So in the Steelers case right now, they're I have them projected as slightly over the cap number, which they obviously have to be compliant with 3 weeks from today, and they will be. But in the meantime, if they transition tag Sutton and they didn't work out a long-term deal with him prior to March 15th, they would have to accommodate that full nearly $16 million under the cap. Could they theoretically do that? Absolutely, they could. They could turn around and cut some players and restructure some players. They could accommodate the cap hit. The question is that the right move, or is that something that they want to do? And I think we would both agree that it's probably not a good business decision to do that. Once you transition, we talk about this in the past when it's come to players and the franchise tag. Once you tag a player at a certain amount, regardless if it's a franchise tag or a transition tag, you're telling the player and his representation that you think that player's worth that for at least 1 year, because there is a distinct possibility that that player might wind up playing underneath that tag for that amount. So thus, if you transition tag a guy like Cameron Sutton at nearly $16 million, you're telling them, okay, look, we think you're worth that, as your annual yearly value. And any agent at that point is going to, if they're in the right mind and doing their job, they were going to use that as a starting point, as an average yearly value for a long-term deal. They'd be foolish not to,
right?
Unless they could get some crazy 4-year fully guaranteed deal at a lower number or something along those lines there. So not only are you tying up the cap space of nearly $16 million by transition tagging Cameron Sutton, you're also telling them, okay, well, when we get to the long-term deal negotiations here, that's probably going to be the starting point that you're going to demand there. Now, also, once you transition tag a player, you are essentially putting a lot of leverage in on that player's side too, because when it comes to outside offer sheets, he's not obligated to sign any offer sheet out there. And if there's something that he does not like that he gets from the other team, he's not obligated to sign it. So he might at that point, Sutton might say, you know what? I don't like these offer sheets out there. I don't like what the Steelers are offering me. I'll just play under that transition tag for nearly $15.8 million. And there's nothing nobody can do about it. And I'll take my chances next year in unrestricted free agency and see if either the Steelers want to franchise tag me or work out a deal by then. So there are a lot of reasons why. It's one thing if he was worth more overall, then obviously you'd probably really think about the franchise tag at that point, which for a cornerback this year is $18.14 million. We know that's not going to happen. And once again, people listening to this are probably thinking, well, he's not even worth the transition tag amount. But once again, the transition tag is not foolproof in the fact that you're opening him up to receiving offers still from other teams. And he might just, all it takes is one team to overpay or one team to structure something and make it where you couldn't potentially match it. Not only that, you're tying up that nearly $16 million in cap space, waiting to see what may or may not happen as far as an offer sheet might go.
Sure. And although Pittsburgh could theoretically, as you said, afford that if they cut multiple players and restructured multiple deals, they're not going to do that. And so I think it was good for you to lay that out and throw very much cold water on the idea. But the long and short is they will not franchise tag anybody. They will not transition tag anybody. And that's kind of end of story right there.
Right. That's hopefully if you read that post or if you're listening to this now, it's the franchise tag is out of the question altogether. It would be super, super surprising if they transition tag Cameron Sutton.
Absolutely. I think the most interesting thing, the thing people should focus on, it's not as gaudy, but some of these restricted free agents, who gets tendered at what level, who doesn't get tendered and potentially tries to be re-signed for a lower amount. And I know that's not going to be maybe the most marquee names there, but a James Pierre, J.C. Hassenauer, and others, that's what I'm looking for when it comes to anything, not that it's a tag, but just that tender kind of world that we can talk about.
Right. And, as far as the restricted, it's one of the first things that I what do I call that series coming out of
Primer.
Yeah. And we've already, I think, covered a lot of those restricted names there, just to go through them real quick once again here with the restricted free agents. James Pierre, you're probably, I think it's reasonable to expect the team to issue him a right of first refusal restricted tender in the coming weeks. Steven Sims, I think there's a possibility that you could, restricted tender him. J.C. Hassenauer, there's nearly $2.7 million on a restricted tender. Sound a little rich. A right of first refusal restrictor tender on him. I think that could go either way with him. I think the first two, James Pierre and Steven Sims, are more likely to receive the restricted tenders more so than a J.C. Hassenauer. Huh?
You think? I mean, it's just, I hear you, maybe you can get this guy for cheaper, but he is the backup center. There is no other option right now. They do seem to like Hassenauer.
Right. And I even put way back in that primer it was written on January 11th. I said it's certainly not out of the question that he receives a right of first refusal. I just think that the chances of the other two are higher than Hassenauer.
Okay. Yeah, it is interesting, though, because that money, we talked about this before, that money adds up. If you hypothetically gave the original round right of first refusal tender to all three, that is how much in cap space? 2.7?
Well, let's call it, what is the right of first refusal at this point? I haven't, those numbers weren't even known at the time that I wrote the article, and obviously the cap has been set since then.
Sure.
Let's see here. Right of first refusal is close to what it was projected at, $2.627 million. So let's take that and times it by 3, right?
Sure, 7.8.
Because you're not gonna tender Jeremy McNichols, right?
Right. That's the one we can confidently
because
include.
He's the other one there. You're looking at $7.881 million, and obviously you got to take out roster displacement and all like that on top of it. So you're looking at a cool $6 million, right?
Which is not a small number,
right? Which the position that this team sits in right now, that's especially with them technically over the cap right now, that's something that you have to make sure you budget for. So will all three of them be restricted tendered? We'll see. At least one or two of them will be. I think we feel pretty confident in that. The question is will all three of Pierre, Sims, and Hassenauer be restricted tender? But once again, that does use up cap space, and those tenders have to be made here within the next 3 weeks as well.
Right. I know, again, that's not a great headline. Will this team tender Steven Sims? Is not as sexy as will they transition tag, Cam Sutton. But to me, it's more interesting and more relevant question we'll be watching for over the next three weeks.
Right.
All right, Dave, what else do we have here? You want to talk about some free agent defense alignment, how that relates to Larry Ogunjobi? So what kind of thought process do you have there?
Yeah, and this has just really come about, this, us having this discussion just based off of kind of rumblings or news that's out there on a couple of these defensive tackles. Let's start with the Washington Commanders and Daron Payne. The latest report is that knowledge of the situation that the Commanders are expected to use a franchise tag on Daron Payne. And obviously if they do, that's probably going to keep him off the market, right? Davlin Tomlinson with the Vikings was set to have his current contract void here coming up here pretty soon. According to Phil Yates of ESPN, the two sides have decided to push that void date back with until the start of the new league year, with hopes that the two sides could come to some sort of long-term agreement. So it sort of sounds like every effort's going to be made to keep Davlin Tomlinson off the free agent market here. Now let's look at some other interior defensive linemen. Let me pull up the tracker here. Some interior defensive linemen set to become unrestricted. I want that switch. There it goes. Let's take edge out of that. Let's look at guys that played, 55% or more of the snaps for their team last year. We already talked about Daron Payne. Jaron Reed, he is 31, however. Do you see Jaron Reed as being a big winner in unrestricted free agency? In other words, a prime target for multiple teams?
Probably not. I wouldn't call him, the prize of free agency or anything close to that.
What about Greg Gaines from the Rams?
Yeah, he got some buzz a couple of years back during their kind of big Super Bowl runs and pushes. I don't know.
I think he's coming off his rookie deal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds right. So again, is he going to be a big money guy? No, but there could be some interest there.
Isaiah Buggs.
Our old friend Isaiah Buggs. I mean, kudos to him. I think he's turned things around in Detroit, became a leader, his play seemed to be better, but I don't think you never know, but I'm not sure if a Pittsburgh reunion is in the cards.
Let's see here. Fletcher Cox at 33, his contract's voiding.
Yeah, he should be gone. Time in Philadelphia is done. I mean, I know that Pittsburgh, reportedly they tried to trade for him a couple of years ago, but 33, maybe his play slipped a bit. It would be un-Steeler-like to sign a guy like that. It's a new regime, so we'll check that. That'll be.
And I'm not just talking about just the Steelers either. I'm talking about league-wide. How, as far as big money goes, how many of these guys are going to be in high demand?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. I think Cox will have some interest, but we're probably talking 1-year deals when it comes to Fletcher Cox.
All right, this kid named Javon Hargrave.
Yeah, he'll be in demand.
He will be in demand. David Onyemata from the Saints, his contract's voiding.
He had a couple good years with the Saints, I think. I don't know.
31 years of age, coming off of a $9 million APY deal.
Yeah, he did have 5 sacks last year. It's hard for me to know for sure what the market for some of these guys is. Not having my ear close to that fully. There'll be some interest, but I doubt he's not going to be big money type interest.
Let's go on down. Taven Bryan, a former first-round draft pick of, I think it was the Jaguars, right? Mm-hmm. Most recently of the Browns. He's not going to be in that high of demand, I would think, right?
No, he won't.
Draymond Jones from the Broncos is 26, played 57.8% of the snaps.
No, he won't be in big demand either.
One guy that probably going to make a little bit of money this offseason, Zach Allen from the Cardinals, right? But he's more of three. I guess he could fit in multiple fronts.
Yeah, he had a good year. Looking at his numbers, 5.5 sacks this year for Arizona, so I'm sure he'll get a decent paycheck.
Poona Ford.
Yeah, I mean, he had, some really good tape in Seattle, was an interesting guy coming out. Again, I don't know exactly what number he's going to be at, but he can get paid a little bit. I think he's still pretty young.
All right, and the last one I want to talk about here would be Larry Ogunjobi then.
Right. We have not heard much about Ogunjobi and, pending free agent or starter to play considerable snaps. Now, he only had 1.5 sacks. His play was hot and cold. He did battle a toe injury, and whenever, he certainly made some high-level impact plays. And so it's one of the guys I've been uncertain of in terms of how the team feels about him, if they're likely to bring him back or not. And I could see this going either way. I would more lean towards letting him walk, but I understand if you do that, your defensive line room looks really slim right now. It's Cam Hayward, and not really sure what else is going to be there.
I guess the overall why I wanted to go down this rabbit hole here on the after kind of the, I don't know if you call them reports or rumors or speculation or according to sources with the Daron Payne and who was the other
Dalvin Tomlinson?
Yeah, Dalvin Tomlinson news with it looking less likely that those guys are going to hit unrestricted free agency here. What does this do to the value of a guy like Larry? How far up? In other words, how much in demand does a guy like Larry Ogunjobi become on in unrestricted free agency, assuming Payne and Tomlinson do not hit it?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt his value. I don't know how much it's going to help it.
Obviously, Javon Hargrave leads the list based on the names we rattled off, right?
Sure, he'll be the big prize.
Okay. But beyond him, of those names that I rattled off. I mean, is Ogunjobi like top 3?
Probably not. I don't know where exactly I would rank him. I don't watch enough of the other 31 teams to be able to properly rank that. I mean, again, I think his play was better than some of the stats, but the guy did only have 1.5 sacks this year, and so you get paid by sacks. That's why the Bears were going to give him a ton of money after that big 7-sack season in 21 with the Bengals. So that's going to ding his value to some extent. What number is right for Ogunjobi? We've talked about maybe coming in just a bit under what he got paid this year with Pittsburgh. But again, he wants that multi-year deal, I'm sure, after that deal with Chicago fell through. And does Pittsburgh want to give him that for a guy that's battled some injuries, has some hot and cold tape? That's kind of where I start to think, maybe you look elsewhere.
And I guess that's kind of where I'm going here, not so just more from the probability standpoint of them being able to resign him, because they're probably not going to want to. Let's say he even lowered his value to $6 million.
Mm-hmm.
Are the Steelers going to want to try to accommodate a $6 million 1-year deal for Ogunjobi? I mean, they could.
Yeah, I don't think he wants 1 year there. I think he wants that long-term deal because he's not getting any younger. And again, he's, I'm sure, upset that 3-year, $40 million contract with Chicago fell through after he failed his physical.
And if he can't get a multi-year deal for more than $6 million or so, he probably would become a 1-year mercenary once again if the deal was right.
Yeah, if he couldn't get the long-term deal that he wanted, then you take the 1-year deal, try to bet on yourself, and stay healthy next year and try again.
Once again, the whole reason I wanted to go down this is I think if this comes to fruition with Payne and Tomlinson, I think it lessens the chances of Ogunjobi being re-signed.
Yeah, maybe to me a small amount, but I think it's pretty negligible. I don't think it's going to really move the needle too much because I think those guys are just in different worlds than where Ogunjobi sits right now.
Okay. But he's going to, would he be top 5 in demand for interior defensive linemen? Assuming Payne and Tomlinson don't hit it. Maybe,
but I didn't watch a lot of Puna Forte this year. I mean, where would you rank Ogunjobi among that group?
I would think, he's top 5 in demand easily. I would think if those two don't hit it.
Okay. Yeah, potentially. I mean, the combine is when the whole NFL world gets together and agents start to talk. And so maybe we'll hear some more chatter about Ogunjobi because it has been super quiet on free agent front. I mean, we've heard about Cam Sutton a ton, even Robert Spillane. What's going to happen to him? Could he get brought back? Things like that. Terrell Edmonds, but really not heard a peep about Larry Ogunjobi.
All right. Back to Cameron. That's really all I wanted to discuss when it came to Ogunjobi. And that, once again, just on the heels of that recent reports about Payne and Tomlinson, my view, and I didn't think the chances were that great. I didn't think it was a slam dunk thing that Ogunjobi was going to be back prior to all this. Mm-hmm. And my main takeaway is I think it lessens the chances of him being re-signed if indeed Payne and Tomlinson don't hit unrestricted free agency.
I will just say, though, again, if you're Pittsburgh, not that you want to base your decision solely off of this, but you understand if Ogunjobi goes elsewhere, your D-line room is looking pretty light. I mean, it's who are your starters next year? You got Cam Hayward. Who else do you got?
That's great. And we've talked about that since, and that's why we really think this team's going to invest early in the draft at that position, regardless of what happens with Ogunjobi.
Sure, but you may have to address it in free agency as well, because to get all your other starters, rotational pieces through just the draft, is a tricky proposition. So, Montravius Adams at nose tackle, you can try to pencil him in. He came on stronger the back half of the year, but he didn't have a great season overall. Again, what are their plans for DeMarvin Leal? Not quite sure. Isaiah Loudermilk, a disappointing sophomore season. Wormley with a torn ACL. Alualu is not going to be back. There aren't a lot of options there right now.
Right. So, you obviously, the Steelers aren't a team that overpays. And once again, Ogunjobi's probably going to want a multi-year deal.
Right. But so will probably any other free agent that you want to sign to come in and start. I'm trying to kick around names. Nashawn Robinson, I think could get some money. I think Matt Ioannidis would be a good fit with Pittsburgh. So
what about my boy John Kaminsky? that they should have signed a couple weeks or several months ago.
He had a great year in Detroit. I know we talked about that in the offseason whenever he got dumped by, was it Atlanta or whoever, and he went up to the Lions and had a great year.
Man, you could probably get him on a multi-year deal that wouldn't kill you, and he could be that guy off the bench.
Yeah, I think Kaminsky's a name to consider. I know when I made my very broad kind of first pass through a wish list of free agency, and I'll post that closer to the March 15th start of the new league year, Kaminsky was on that list. I mean, he had 4 sacks for Detroit this past season.
Now, you pointed to defense last year, and you hit, all right? You nailed it right over the center field wall with James Daniels. We expect nothing but that this time around now.
All right, I've set the bar too high, I think. Yeah, I don't know who my James Daniels, if I'll even have one this year, is, but I'm starting to make my list of names that I want to start to research more.
What about our buddy Andrew Billings?
Yeah, I think cheap 1-year deal. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's that pure interior plugger. He's not going to offer anything as a pass rusher, but Pittsburgh has seen him a lot. Obviously, there was interest pre-draft when he came out of Baylor. So that's a name we've kicked around a little bit before and is also on that long current wish list that I'm kind of going to whittle down before I actually post the article.
All right. Anything else you'd like to talk about on that kind of interior defensive lineman topic?
No, nothing for there. Although I wrote for the other side of the football today about the lack of interior, really just offensive line depth in general, both interior and the tackle. We mentioned that, a little bit earlier this week, so I won't belabor it too much. So if hypothetically Pittsburgh runs back its starting 5, and they may not, but if we assume that they do, at the very least, the depth must be upgraded because there was nothing there. Maybe Hassenauer at center, although he's really, to me, a pure center. He can play guard. He has played guard. Too small, though, to play guard for more than a half of action, in-game replacement type stuff. And so at tackle, you got nothing there. That's a big sore spot for this team right now.
Right, absolutely. But and we'll see if they address it at, even with the lower end unrestricted free agent or something like that. I know you're not as on board with it as I am, but I would like to see them re-sign Jesse Davis on the cheap to a minimal deal to at least have him around to compete.
Yeah, I mean, you could. Do you want to play this guy at all? I mean, maybe they re-sign him or Trent Scott. Yeah, I could see Trent Scott coming back. He played a little bit last year as that tackle eligible, and because he knows Pat Meyer, and he can theoretically play both tackle spots to give you something there, but you got to do better than either of those guys.
All right, I wanted to retake your temperature after the last couple of days on where you're at on a Cameron Sutton average yearly value.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with the numbers and the market value. And so I think, you're well within your rights to say 13.5, 14 million is going to be the number for him. And it wouldn't shock me if that's where it came in at. I just like to maybe hold on to him. And maybe it's just pure hope and black and gold color glasses that you can try to get this guy for less. Because I think he wants to stay in Pittsburgh, wants to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think either way he will be re-signed, and we'll just have to really see what that number looks like.
Do you envision it being a 3, 4, or 5 year deal if they work something out with him?
3 or 4. I couldn't tell you which one, but 3 or 4 years.
I would agree on that. I mapped a little something out yesterday, looking at market values and cash flows and guaranteed money. If you're driving and you're holding coffee right now, please put that coffee in the coffee holder right now. I don't want people to or pull over to the side of the road right here. Look, I've been kind of strong in my conviction that is market value is going to be from 10.5 to 13.5, somewhere around in there. And I really think that's going to be the case. And I really could potentially see it being in the higher of that small window there. So what if it was a 3-year, $39 million deal, which brings out a average yearly value of $13 million, $13.5 million signing bonus, a $1.5 million fully guaranteed base salary in 2023. As far as the second year money goes, and percentage of guarantee of that that we'll see what they do. That odds, he's not Minkah Fitzpatrick and he's not TJ Watt, right?
Sure, right.
Where it comes to fully guaranteeing those first couple years there, might though the Steelers have to fully guarantee the first 2 years to make it worth his while, though. That's the big question, or at least a pretty good chunk of that second year money to make it worth his while.
Yeah, or could you do a roster bonus as a kind of a
and they probably will. In fact, I have penciled in here a $3 million roster bonus in 2024 with his base salary in 2024 at $11.5 million. What that would do is that would give him a first year take upon signing the deal in 2023 based on the way I had this laid out. It would pay him $15 million in 2023. Now his cap charge would be $6 million based on the way I have this thing mapped out. Okay. Through 2024, his cash flow would be $26.5 million, which is just slightly more than his $13 million new money average, right?
Right.
I think that number is going to have to at least be based on a $13 million average yearly value. That his cash flow through 2024 will have to at least be $26 million. I have it at 26.5. His cap charge in 2024 would be $19 million. Obviously, there would probably be some sort of roster bonus in there that should you have to restructure to free up a little bit of cap room, you could put in. This is a 3-year deal, by the way. And then his final year, 2025, you'd be looking at a base salary of $12.5 million and a cap number of $17 million on there. So to recap, a 3-year, $39 million deal, average yearly value of $13 million, let's call the guarantee $22 million.
Gotcha. Sorry to interrupt here. Some news just coming in. I do want to get back to your Cam Sutton kind of outline, but according to Jerry Dulac, who just tweeted this moments ago, says that Jerry Olszewski will not be retained. And Dulac saying that Aaron Curry was hired to be the inside linebacker coach, not the outside linebacker edge coach. And so putting that aside, the nuts and bolts here, Dulac saying Olszewski is out as the Steelers coach in whatever capacity he was working in last year.
Yeah, that's a bit of a shock. I didn't, look, I know Jerry went through losing his wife. What was it, last year, right?
Yes, last year.
I find it kind of curious that you're bringing in a guy that's mostly dealt with, edge rushers and played edge to come in and be an inside linebacker coach. I find that curious.
Well, Curry was an off-ball linebacker. He was like an outside linebacker, but like in a 4-3 front. So, I mean, what did he do in Seattle, though? Do we know exactly who he worked with primarily?
I thought he was the edge guy with them.
Okay. I didn't look into it as much, so I don't know for sure. But I mean, in the NFL and at Wake Forest, I mean, he wasn't a pass rusher. He was that, like 4-3 Sam linebacker type.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know. I mean, we'll see, but I guess, we'll figure out where Curry's at, but the actual, the big news there is that Olszewski's not returning. So does Dunbar and Martin just continue working with the edge guys the way that they have in the past, or is there something else going on? Will they hire somebody else? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's a curious development, right?
Yeah, Pittsburgh's coaching staff's back down to 16, I think, with Curry in, Olszewski out. So there's some news there. Will they continue to add to that coaching staff? They have now just 5 defensive coaches, which is if that was to stay the same, and we'll see if that stays the same, that'll be probably the smallest group in football. So that could change, but something to watch.
All right. Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. But anyway, back to Cam Sutton. So 3 years, $39 million. Yeah, that's big money for sure. It's a huge upgrade for Cam Sutton, what he was making on this past extension he signed in 2020. So the market would dictate that. Can you try to get him at a bit of a discount, just because maybe he wants to really remain in Pittsburgh. We'll see, but money, as always, talks.
All right. And once again, that's based on a $13 million, average yearly value. As we've stated a few times, obviously you'd love to try to get him cheaper than that. But I think when you look at the market, man, and look at some of these guys around him, and you look at the guys, set to become unrestricted free agents, it feels like that, the number is going to be, once again, somewhere between that 10.5 and $13.5 million range.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a big difference between if it's 10.5 or 13.5. I mean, we're talking a pretty big swing there, I think, in terms of where he slots overall across the league. And of course, just with the actual money, if it's a 3-4 year deal.
Well, once again, if you got him at looking at the cornerback market, if you got him at $10 million, I mean, he's going to be way down on that list. It would take to get him into the current 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. To get him in the top 15, he would have to top $13.333 million.
Right. Like I said, it's a big swing. I mean, we're talking 3 years, 30 million, or 3 years, 40 million. I mean, that's a pretty big difference there. So do you think it's more likely to come in closer towards the high end of 13.5, 14 million, or closer to that 10.5, 11 million number?
I feel, just based on looking at the numbers in the market, I feel it'd be more closer to the top end once again. That's why, I mean, could it settle somewhere around 12 million? Possibly.
That might be a happy medium there for sure. It's still, now again, the market's the market, but even if it's 12 million, that is such a big pay raise for Sutton based off his current deal, which was 2 years, 9 million. I think he signed in 2020. Is that correct?
It was with him. What was it? Yeah, I think it was 9 million, wasn't it?
It was 4.5 per year, and they added the dummy years on there to manage that 2020 cap season. So if you get 12 million, I mean, you're almost tripling your money. It's not a bad deal for Sutton. Now, again, the market is the market, but it would be a big.
But you're not going to leave money on the table, right?
No, but if there's a negotiation, if you want to maybe some sort of wiggle room there, you sit there and say, yeah, I'm not getting maybe exact true market value, but I'm still getting a substantial increase. I'm staying at the place that I want to stay, and maybe that's an incentive for Sutton to take a bit less.
Okay.
But we'll see. Like I said, it's a number I'll be watching as closely as anything when it comes to free agents this summer. So we'll see, how close it gets to that projection. One more thing to talk about here today, Dave, some, contract related stuff. And this kind of came up and talked about a bit more after Matthew Slater returned to New England for the, I think, 98th season of his NFL career, about and you can explain this better than I can, but the 4-year qualifying contract deals to some of these veteran types that can reduce the cap hit for these guys. That happened with Terrell Edmonds last year. So kind of walk us through what that is and what candidates there are for Pittsburgh for those contracts this offseason.
Yeah, first and foremost, let it be known that to qualify to be a 4-year, to sign a 4-year player qualifying contract, your 4 previous seasons, accrued seasons, would have had to been with the same team that you're with now. And uninterrupted. Okay. So in other words, you can't waive a guy and then bring him back and that he has to have been part of it states in their 90-man roster, overall, consecutively. So, a guy like Robert Spillane, for example, would not be eligible for it because of him getting waived in that early year, there. But technically, if you want to look at guys that just from a time standpoint would qualify for it, the list is small. It's Terrell Edmonds, it's Zach Gentry, it's Cameron Sutton, it's Devin Bush, Benny Snell Jr., Mason Rudolph, and Tyson Alualu. Those are the guys that would be technically qualify for it. Now, you want a quick refresher on what this is? This is the type of contract that Terrell Edmonds signed last offseason. Right. So now the actual benefit for 2022 that teams or 2023 that teams can take advantage of totals out at $1.35 million is the actual kind of discounted benefit that you get from signing a player to such a deal. You can only also sign 2 players a year to such a contract, right? So if you wanted to sign 2 players to these kind of contracts and they agreed, you could. However, the $1.35 million benefit is the total amount. So you would have to decide, do you want to give all that to one, how do you want to divide it between the 2 players? Last year's instance, they only signed 1 player to that type of contract, and they gave all that extra benefit money to Terrell Edmunds. Now, it does come with basically a $1.35 million salary cap benefit, that $1.35 million of extra money above the minimum that the player already could earn on a regular contract. Does not count against the cap. That's where the benefit aspect of this thing comes in. So I think we all agree that Devin Bush probably isn't going to be interested in such a deal, right?
Yeah, any deal from Pittsburgh, he will not be interested in. He will not be a Steeler next year.
And the same with Mason Rudolph, right?
Correct.
All right. Benny Snell, that's too much to pay Benny Snell, right?
Probably, yeah.
Cameron Sutton's going to laugh if you offer him that.
Yeah, do not offer Sutton that.
And Tyson Alualu is probably going to retire anyway. If Tyson Alualu did for some reason come back, that would probably be the deal that he signs.
Yeah, but I can't see any situation he comes back.
All right, so that puts us back down to Terrell Edmunds and Zach Gentry as being the two true candidates for such a deal. Now, a lot of people probably, and look, I'm not saying that these are the deals that they're going to sign or should sign. I'm saying that these 2 players are the truest candidates for such a deal. People are probably going to argue, man, Terrell Edmunds is probably worth $3.5-4 million a year. He'd probably laugh at signing that same kind of deal. Perhaps he would, but what if his market value craps to bed again this offseason? Teams just aren't interested in him.
Sure. I mean, he signed the deal last year, so it's not a crazy thought that he would sign the deal again. It's not like circumstances changed dramatically. He had another. I mean, he played better this year than he played last year, but he's a pretty limited player. He is who he is. It's not going to command big money. So I think if you want to circle one name, that potentially, not saying that it will, but potentially it's Terrell Edmunds.
All right. Here's something I think Matthew Marksey's going to ask this on a site on one of his questions coming up here, daily morning questions that he likes to roll out there. How much did Terrell Edmunds increase his value last season?
Probably a little. Again, I think it was a better year in 22 than 21. Better for the whole run defense, and his tackling improved. I mean, I think Matthew actually posed the question this morning. Some comments here.
How did he phrase it?
The actual title is, how much of a pay raise did Terrell Edmunds earn in 2022? Okay. That's the question there. It's a little bit weird because he's still, he's a guy that's played so much football, still pretty young, not obviously high impact guy, but somebody that seems to be worth something, even if it is, hypothetically $3 million per year, something, 2 years, $6 million, something like that, to see him have as little interest as he did last year, wait until right before the draft to sign, kind of was unexpected to me. And I'd like to think at some point somebody's going to give this guy a 2-year deal worth something, not a ton, but something. So that's kind of my feel of it right now. But the safety market is generally a bit more down compared to other positions. And Edmunds obviously is not going to be a splashy type of guy. So, it's a little hard for me to say right now.
All right. So I agree. His value increased, but I guess the question is how much. Ideally, you'd like to get this guy to sign a 2-year deal for
sure.
$3.5 million per.
I would do that personally.
I mean, that'd help keep his cap charge down anyway. Now, will he want to lock himself up for 2 more years at that point? or might he get a better offer? That's going to be his value regardless, I think. Now, the question is there anybody really kind of clamoring to sign him, and does he want to leave for just a little bit more than that?
Yeah, it's, again, a little bit tricky just with how depressed the market seemed to be. I mean, were you surprised that, A, it took him that long to sign last year, and then B, how little he signed for? Was that surprising to you? It was to me.
The Steelers have just named Aaron Curry as their inside linebackers coach officially.
Okay, so that's the official move there. That'll replace Olszewski, evidently. And will the team hire an outside linebackers coach? We'll have to see. But again, Carl Dunbar, Denzel Martin have worked with the edge guys because TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, those guys have primarily been, considered defensive linemen. They don't drop into coverage that much anymore. And so they just get lumped in with the rest of the D-line.
Okay. Where were we?
Talking about Terrell Edmunds. Were you surprised with him getting so little and waiting so long last offseason?
As a whole, no. Maybe the length and the fact that he did end up signing a 4-year qualifying contract.
Yeah. So do you think what are the odds that happens again, if you had to guess?
I think I don't think it's as likely. I don't think it's 100% slam dunk, obviously, but I think it might be higher than what most people think the chances are.
Okay. And then with Gentry, what do you come in on that? Any potential odds there?
I mean, that's a great question. How much is Gentry worth on the open market as a number 2 tight end?
Yeah, we went down this road with Jesse James, and he got more than we thought. Now, will this happen again with Gentry? I don't think so. I think James offered more pass game value than what Gentry offered, which kind of increased, the numbers a bit. But how much is he worth? We'll have to see.
And I think that's something that really needs thorough examination. $4 million is too much for Gentry, right? Or no? From the Steelers.
Yeah, again, I've kind of stuck in that $3 million range, I guess, with both guys, with Edmunds and Gentry. So around that 2-year, $6 million, give or take a little bit kind of range.
Okay. All right. I don't think they're going to sign both of those guys because once again, that $1.35 million benefit would have to be split, and then it obviously takes away from each player's money. So if they're going to use a 4-year qualifying contract this year, it would be on one player.
Right.
And the question becomes, will it be either or neither with Edmunds or Gentry?
Sure. It's something that we'll be watching pretty closely.
And look, I mean, I don't think either one of those guys are going to take such a contract right out of the chute. So it might be Edmunds didn't re-sign last year until
a week before the draft.
Right before the draft. So, you could be, if either one of those do sign such a deal, it would probably be several weeks after free agency starts.
Right. Yeah. I think that'll be a good indication of their market. If it's a couple weeks in and they're still, waiting and haven't signed anywhere, that means that they're trying to see if something comes up that's better, but usually that means nothing better is going to come up.
All right. Anything else?
Do want to mention here before we get to our reader emails and close out today's show, we do on this Sunday, February 26th, I'll be doing our annual Walk the Mock live draft over my YouTube channel. Just search my name, Alex Kozora, and that'll be 8 p.m. Eastern time, a 3-round live draft. And so you guys can jump into the YouTube chat and help me draft. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you usually get a pretty good turnout for that, don't you?
Yeah, usually a pretty strong crowd, so hopefully that'll be the case this year.
All right, got a quick little shout out here from my bookie we have to give here in this show. The NFL season has come to an end, but at my bookie, the opportunities to win don't stop. Whether you bet to earn or to make the games more exciting, my bookie gives you the most for your money with a redesigned deposit bonus. Getting started is easy. Just visit mybookie.ag and use promo code TERRIBLE to claim a bonus up to $2,000. Use promo code TERRIBLE to get a deposit bonus. It gives you extra funds to play with all the way up to $2,000. With MyBookie, you can bet on the NBA, NHL, UFC, or play for a share of big cash prizes in the weekly online blackjack tournaments that they have. With so many brands to choose from, you need a platform that makes it simple to bet and win, like MyBookie. So bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. And once again, even though football season's over with in the NFL, you still have the other major sports that you can bet on with them as well, too. So we appreciate them, and a shout out to them. Let's get to some reader emails. Alex?
All right, let's do it. What do we got here, Dave?
Pastor Joe Green says to Steelers Depot and those gifted proprietors, thank you for your tireless efforts. You are better than ever. Question, would you be open to this trade? The Steelers give their second of 2 second-round picks in the 2023 NFL Draft and receive a first-round pick in 2024, as well as a fifth pick and sixth pick in 2023. He says this would allow us to obtain a second first-round pick for 2024, a draft that most experts agree will be stronger than 2023. It would also allow to replace our missing day 3 picks in this year's NFL Draft. So here's what he's saying. Give up their second of 2 second-round picks and receive a first-round pick in 2024, as well as in 2023, a fifth and sixth round pick. I mean, yeah. 49 for a first, a 5, and a 6. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I don't think any team would be crazy enough to offer that kind of deal unless something insane happened, a quarterback fell, or some new GM doesn't know what he's doing. But yeah, I would do that. I mean, as it's laid out, as you've laid it out, Pastor Joe Green. Yeah, I think we both would. I don't think you're going to see any team do that. So anyway, Deshaun Campbell writes in, I would like to give my thoughts on the upcoming wide receiver draft. While I would love to see this team draft a Jackson Smith and Jigma, who I think would be perfect fit, or a Tank Dell, whose play on the field has become off the charts, but 2 guys who has not been mentioned are Tennessee Blitnikoff winner Jalen Hyatt, who's probably going to run a 4.340, he says, and had 955 yards out of the slot, and also LSU wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, who was mentioned as a 1 or 2 best wide receiver before the season. He says, I believe this wide receiver class is actually pretty deep. I don't know if there's really a question there other than, look, I will say this. I think the wide receiver class is deep. Guys like Jalen Hyatt, who I've just kind of scratched the surface with. I will say this. Yes, you are right. I mean, he over the last 3 seasons, he's seen his slot play increase tremendously, and he's probably going to run like the wind at the combine. I think he had a nice average depth of target. I don't get the feeling that he's first round material. Do you, Alex, when it comes to Jalen Hyatt?
I haven't watched this game really so far, and so I really can't comment on that. I haven't really felt like and seen him in that first round mix. It's been more Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, those types of guys. So probably more day 2, although if he tears up the combine, that always gets, headlines. And if you're running, 4.3 something, then it's going to boost your stock and boost your, presence. So we'll have to see after the combine. I mean,
if this team, decided to, wait until round, let's say 4 even, to draft a wide. I mean, I think this class is fairly deep overall. Feels like it.
Yeah, there's good depth. Again, it lacks the sizzle at the top. There isn't the first round guys. You're not going to have top 10 picks, top 15 selections in all likelihood that you had, last year, the past couple of years. But yeah, there's quality depth throughout.
Ethan Warner writes in, hey, Dave and Alex, appreciate all the great work you and the rest of the depot do. Seems like we'll be taking an offensive lineman, corner, defensive lineman, or maybe a linebacker with our first round pick. What one guy do you both like at all those positions that could be available at 17? I mean, it's way too early for me to sit here and say I got to have that guy. That's the guy that fits best that I think the team could take it in any of these positions. I mean, we're talking end of February right here, and the combine hasn't even happened yet. So there's I'm not going to sit here and name one guy at all those positions there, but I will tell you that I think you're on track position wise. Offensive lineman, corner, defensive lineman, and maybe a linebacker, both an edge linebacker and an inside linebacker. I think you could put on that list as well too. So I think you're right there. But I mean, as far as which of guy I'd circle at all those potential positions at 17, I mean, it's way too early for that.
Yeah, I just haven't gone through enough to really give quality, confident answers there. So I'm with you, Dave.
Brett now has 2 emails in here. I'm going to only read one on Brett. Sorry. There seems to be a general sense that receiver is a major need for this team in the coming draft, and I tend to think that is being slightly exaggerated. All right, Brett, are you saying, first and foremost, we think, Alex and I think it's a major need, or a general sense?
It sounded more general. It didn't sound targeted at us.
He says, the way I see it, the team traded Claypool in part to get more playing time for Pickens. He and Johnson should almost all see almost all the snaps on the outside. All the current slot options are coming back, and the way the team currently uses a slot receiver, even a guy like Juju could only provide limited value. So why spend a lot of capital on the position you don't use? So I guess the second part of his is, well, the Steelers don't use a slot receiver, so why dedicate a draft pick to him or draft capital to him?
I mean, I don't want to say they don't use him. I know that Juju's role was pretty niche and limited his last couple of years with the team, but it still was an important role. And, this past year, they didn't use the slot a lot because they didn't have any slot options. So was it because they didn't want to use it, or because they didn't really have the guy to use in the slot outside of just, the jet stuff and all the motions they did with Sims and Olszewski? So I agree. It's not the major need for this team, wide receiver, but really there is kind of a lack of confidence in what you have in the slot. Now, Calvin Austin returns, and, we'll see what you can get out of him, and that's something to certainly keep in mind. But I understand, the slot need there because there's really no proven guy on this roster right now.
He goes on to state, there also seems to be an assumption that Calvin Austin III will never be able to contribute. I don't know. I mean, look,
I've never seen anyone assume that.
I guess we're getting lumped into being Calvin Austin haters now because we won't come out and say he's the answer in the slot. I'm assuming that that's the way Brett's aiming here, is because we have not stood up and say, this is the guy that the Steelers can rely on to be, anytime they're in 11 personnel, be your go-to slot guy. I guess that's us hating him now. Here's my thoughts once again on Calvin Austin III. We don't know any more about him, or I don't, than I did after watching his college tape after his selection. Alex knows slightly more than I do because he watched him in the time that he was at camp. A wide receiver having a foot injury is always concerning. I don't care, especially when it needs surgery like he did. Now, does it mean it's career altering? Absolutely not. But how can we sit here and say Calvin Austin is slam dunk the guy, don't worry about the position, based on everything that's happened so far with Calvin Austin?
Sure, it's going to give you pause. Doesn't mean that
am I wrong here?
No, you're not wrong there. And I mean, I watched him for 2 weeks in camp. I didn't learn a whole lot. 1 week was without pads, and so you're not really learning a lot other than he's fast, which you already knew by the 4.32 that he ran. And beyond that, you really didn't learn a whole lot, very, very little. So it's hard to be confident in that. And again, you don't want to forget about him, but there's going to be some pause, some trepidation in terms of not really sure. 4th round pick, small guy, foot injury, needs speed. Not sure what you're going to get next year. So it doesn't, to me, preclude you from considering other slot options.
He says, and the assumption that because he missed a season due to injury, he will never contribute again, to me is simply bad process.
I mean, no, as anybody said that he'll
straw
never.
Man?
Yeah, I mean, I know. I don't think he's saying that we've said that, but I'm not even sure what semi or even credible person or that covers the Steelers talks about the Steelers have said he's never going to contribute again. So I'm sure there's some corner of the internet saying that, but it's a vocal minority of that.
He says each player and each injury are different. He is correct there. The receiver class is not considered to be as good as last year, but it is deep. He says, personally, I don't want them to. I think we're coming into his bias here, Brett's bias. Personally, I don't want them to consider receiver till day 3, see who falls, and try to take advantage of the depth. He says, I have a challenge for both you and Alex if you will accept. I ask that in your next mock draft that you do not draft a receiver till the 7th round. I suspect if you do that you may like the product a little better from filling the holes perspective. I haven't even done a mock draft yet. Have you?
I did a senior bowl one. Yeah, I'm not going to accept the challenge just because I'm not going to sit here and put myself in a corner of what I will or won't do or anything like that. So, again, in terms of who are the proven receivers on the Steelers roster, it's Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and that's it. In terms of guys that are actually, catching the football. I mean, yeah, the Sims Olszewski are there, but they're not proven, guys you're going to roll with. So, that's why Sims
isn't re-signed yet, even though we think it will be. Good point. And Anthony Miller. I mean, are people that high on Anthony Miller? Maybe, or is Brett that high on Anthony Miller?
Maybe we should flip the tables. Yeah, so I understand there. And again, you want to be really deep at receiver because injuries are going to happen. You never know what's going to occur. Somebody gets hurt in week 2, and you're going to have that depth be tested and relied upon. So. That's another consideration there. You want to be deep at receiver, be at least 4 deep because you're going to have 3 starters and one guy to be that backup.
And I don't think either one of us have been saying that are banging the table for this team to draft the receiver early. I just think that people need to be prepared for that in the first 4 rounds to maybe be the case.
Yeah, and it's just good to talk about some of these names. When I talk about a Jackson Smith and Jigba, I'm not saying that they have to draft him at 32, but I think he's just a good fit and just spitballing ideas right now, being so far away from the draft.
And look, obviously new regime in there and all like that, but going back to 2000, there's only been 2 years that this team didn't draft at least one wide receiver.
Yeah, it was the post AB year, and I forget what the other year was, but usually they take a receiver, so probably will again.
Okay. It took a while to get through. I'm not even going to try to get to the second Brett email here, maybe in the next show, depending on if we got time and all we would get to there. But look, we're not anti-Calvin Austin. We're not bang the table, draft a wide receiver in the first, 4 rounds this year either. But I think it's something that you have to look at because of all the variables involved here.
Yeah, again, it's just we're all spitballing ideas, and there's going to be talent at receiver, and they're going to consider it.
All right, anything else you'd like to add here before we wrap up? Made an hour out of nothing. Hour and 10 minutes, hour and 12 minutes out of nothing.
Our specialty. Nope, we'll come back Friday and see what there is to talk about.
All right. Make sure, and we'll remind people again about the walk the mock before then for Alex on Friday. Please make sure if you got time to get on the YouTube machine and help support Alex on that. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button upper right navigational bar to take advantage of that. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.